The topic of my presentation is ISMS, that is Information Security Management Systems, based on ISO 27001, that is a standard, as an information security strategy. How many of you are already ISO 27001 certified? None. How many of you have heard about this earlier? 27001? Yes. Anybody read the standard? Yes, very good. Before we start on information security, I just looked up the meaning of strategy. Of course, all of us have our own interpretation, some sort of vague idea about strategy, but it was interesting to find that strategy is a method or a plan chosen to bring about a desired future, such as achievement of goal or solution to a problem. Now, the problem in question here is how to protect our information. We have so much of information with us: design data, process data, marketing data. We have marketing experts here, their tender data, their purchase data. So much of information in the organization needs protection. So what is information? Well, the standard definition all of us know is it's processed data. That's fine. But did we realize that information is also an asset, just like other assets, like money, building, material, men, and so on? Information is also an asset. And just as how we protect other assets, we need to protect information also, both from competitors as well as disgruntled employees, and so on. And this can exist in many forms. This may be data stored on computers or transmitted across networks. It may be printed on paper, written on paper sent by fax, stored in disks, held on a microfilm, or even spoken in conversations. When you sit in the airport lounge, you find so many businessmen chattering away to glory on their mobile phones, loudly, and without any consciousness of who is likely to sit next to you. Okay? I'm an auditor, and once I chanced that I was sitting in the lounge in an airport, and one person was complaining about the auditor who has come to audit his organization and what trouble he has faced and all that. It was, of course, amusing to see that. And one very interesting observation I made somewhere in the midnight in an airport somewhere, I think in Dubai or somewhere. One gentleman was sitting with a laptop, and every 10 seconds he would close it, making sure that nobody sees. So these are some of the concerns we need to have when we speak even, or when we work in public. And we must all be conscious. Normally when we talk of information protection, we think how to protect some information stored on hard disk, or some files which are labeled confidential and sealed and kept in a drawer. But we must realize that information has a life cycle. Information may be at any of these stages. Like it may be in the stage of being created, it may be in the stage of being transmitted across networks, or it may be, created, processed, stored, transmitted, destroyed, or copied. Even while destroying information, we need to be careful, because if you don't tear the paper properly by using a shredder or something, some of your passwords, your bank account numbers, and all can be found on the waste paper. So, information has to be protected at all its life cycle stages. That is the important point which we all should remember. Right from when it is being generated till it is destroyed, at all stages, whether it is transmitted, processed, or transmitted, whatever, it needs protection. And some of the security concerns to information assets are high user knowledge of IT systems. If somebody is very highly knowledgeable in IT systems, he may pose a threat, because he may not listen to the system administrator or network administrator. He will try to modify himself, or he himself might try to do some sabotage. And theft, sabotage, misuse, hacking, all these are some of the concerns. And version control problems. Let's say you have so many documents and you don't version control them, you don't number them as 1.0 or 2.0, you're likely to get lost. And sometimes if the customer specification is also not properly versioned, then you are likely to get into trouble. Even the marketing order, if there are changes, so version control is a problem. Unrestricted access to your server rooms or data centers. And network failures. See, when we talk of information, it is not only protecting information, it also means making the information available when required. Therefore, a network failure or interruption in the connectivity is also a matter of information security concern. And lack of documentation. If you don't have proper user manuals, how to use a software that is developed, that's likely to create a problem. And virus, we all know, natural calamities like flood, fire, earthquake, and so on, and the man-made disaster called fire. All these are some of the concerns. And so what is needed? What is management, why is management bothered about information security? Is because it's worried about market reputation. If you find information leaked, you find some credit card information of a bank stolen. So market reputation, business continuity. In the event of a disaster, how to continue your business, which is predominantly dependent on information, and how to recover from a disaster, and what is the business loss that is caused because of the loss of information, and loss of customer confidence, and legal liability. Many times you end up paying fines, and what is the cost of security. So all these are what management wants, but we must remember that the security measures or controls that we need to take for maintaining information security are not just technical. It's not enough if you just have a password or you have access restriction or something like that. There are controls spanning different domains. One is technical controls, other is procedural controls. For example, the organization may say that cell phones with cameras are not permitted inside the shop floor. So that is a procedure imposed by the management. Or the management may say that USB drives in a particular area are prohibited. So this is something which is dictated by a procedure. And then physical entry controls. Most of the process industries and even public sectors, they have this CISF and such people who man security gates where only authorized people are permitted inside. And even your data centers or IT rooms or IT centers are covered with proximity card readers, or where you have to swipe the card and then only entry is permitted. That kind of physical access controls. Then logical access, like there should be an access control policy as to who is permitted access to what type of levels. And then personal, the employees themselves can pose a threat. A disgruntled employee or an employee who's leaving the organization, you understand what I mean. So employees themselves can cause a problem, and that's why even personal controls are also important. And then, of course, managerial controls like policies, what is their attitude, approach towards information security, and so on. So information security is about protecting information through selection of appropriate security controls. And if you see right in the center core, if you have information systems that need to be protected, there is a ring of logical security around them, and then there is a ring of physical security, and then organizational and procedural security. So once you implement all these things, you get what is called the protection from information from a range of threats and so on. So we have to realize that information security is a business issue. It is not just IT department's headache. But nowadays we are predominantly dependent on information, and therefore your edge on information is a business issue. Now, there are three significant parameters when we talk of information security from this ISO standard. ISO stands for International Organization for Standardization. They have brought out this standard called 27001. And it primarily considers three things as important parameters for information security. One is confidentiality. Confidentiality, we all understand. The information should be kept confidential and with access possible only to those who are authorized. And the second aspect is the integrity. The information should be accurate and complete. Okay? These are the two keywords for integrity. Suppose you take an old timetable and go to catch a flight, you're likely to miss it because your information is not accurate. Okay? So integrity of information is also a security issue, and availability of information as and when you require it is also a security issue. And then what is information security management system? System means as per this standard, or we have several management system standards which you know, like ISO 9000, EMS and all. It is an interrelation of processes. A single system and multiple systems. It includes an organizational structure, process, procedures, and interrelation of all these forms a system. And it is a management system, and it is about information security. So a company-wide spanning management system is required to protect information. And what does this management system ask you to do? It asks you to establish, implement, operate, monitor, review, maintain, and improve information security. That is what it is helpful for. And these are some of the basic steps of, I want to tell you, in case you really want to do something about it, within this short span of time, I want to give you some significant take home. First of all, you have to define the scope of information which you want to protect. Let us say you have plants in Bangalore and Hyderabad. You want to protect information that is in a plant in Hyderabad. So you declare that the scope is Hyderabad plant. Okay. In fact, I met Dr. Raman long time back when he was the executive director of BHEL Bangalore, and they have these certifications to each of their locations. So if you have decide that Hyderabad plant is going to be covered under this information security management system, you define that as the scope, and then what needs to be done is, basically we have to understand that information security is for protection of information and information processing assets, right? So information processing assets means the physical assets, the hardware, software, then information assets itself, that is the files, databases, and so on, and then even the services, the vendors who are providing you internet service connectivity, and all these form your assets. So those have to be protected. So the first step is right at the bottom, asset identification and valuation. So you have to list all the assets which need to be protected, value them. There is a mechanism for valuing which you have to define yourself. And you have to find out what are the threats, what are the dangers for these information systems, and what are the weaknesses, and you have to evaluate them. See, for example, a CEO's laptop, the threat may be theft, and the weakness may be lack of a security guard in his cabin, something like that. So based on that threat and vulnerability analysis for all the assets, you do what is called a risk assessment, which is the heart of the information security management system. So the risk, once you do, it will tell you that what controls you need to apply, and to what extent you need to apply. Okay, I need to put security guards, but how many of them? Do I need to put 10 or 7? So that you can find out from this risk assessment. So from this you get the security requirements, and the next requirements are the business requirements. The customer also will tell certain security requirements. That plus legal requirements. Based on all these, you select controls from the standard. The standard gives a set of 133 controls which can be employed in different scenarios to achieve information security. And the company has to derive policies and procedures for attaining this information security, applying these controls. Of course, there are basically two types of standards I'm trying to refer. One is this ISO IEC 27001 standard, which has been released in 2005. It's due for revision, which is the mandatory standard. That means if any organization wants to be certified, it gets certified to ISO 27001. And 27002 is a guideline document. It is a guideline for implementation. If an organization wants to implement that, you can follow the best practice guidance given there, right? So the best thing you people can do is get hold of both these standards. There is one-to-one correspondence. Read, for example, 27001 says you shall have a password policy. That's all. 27002 will describe how a good password policy will look like, right? So these can be read in conjunction, and you can benefit from that. And this is the typical structure of a 27001 standard. So it has scope and some references, terms and definitions, and it starts from 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that is the main part of the standard, and it has annexures A, B, C. Annexure A contains the controls. And the rest of the standard, 4 to 8, is similar to ISO 9000 and so on. You're familiar with ISO 9000, I'm sure. Most of you, right? So this is sort of similar to that, except some differences are there. But the significant difference is the annexure. So the initial 4 to 8 are called the framework or the mandatory part. And they basically contain, the 4 contains how to establish and operate a management system, and what are the documentation requirements, and what is the management responsibility and internal audits to be carried out by their own people, organization's own people. Then management has to review the effectiveness of the system, and then how to go about with improvements. So these are some of the, this is the main part of the standard. And then you have annexure controls. There are a total of 133 controls and 39 control objectives. Means if you implement these controls, you achieve those objectives. So these controls are chosen after doing risk assessment. Which control is applicable to me? And these are the annexure domains. There are 11 of them. So first one basically talks about to have a security policy, and A.6 talks about how to have an organization structure for information security, and how to manage your, A7 is how to manage your assets, and then HR security. HR security also talks about non-disclosure agreements from employees and so on, screening of employees and all that. Then physical and environmental security. Then communication and operations, that is the IT domain part. And access control is logical access control. Then information system acquisition and development and maintenance, that is for whatever applications you use within the organization, whether they are procured or developed in-house, whether security aspects are included in that in addition to functional requirements. That is what is covered under this domain. And then incident management. Whenever any security breach happens or any incident takes place, untoward incident, maybe a hacking, maybe a theft, whatever. So all these have to be recorded and resolved, the incidents. That is one requirement. And then business continuity management. In the event of disasters, how do you continue your business? And we have to remember that during a disaster scenario, when business continuity happens, it is not that we offer all the services at the same time, during a disaster time. We offer only the critical services. So the critical services are identified, and you have to have business continuity plans. How will you continue your business during disaster? And compliance talks about legal compliance and technical compliance. Now, when you say legal compliance, the organization has to identify what are the applicable legislations for the organization to follow. That will include all the legislation like Factory Act, Companies Act, and maybe IT Act and all those. And whether the organization is complying to that or not, the auditors will see. But of course, getting an ISMS certification is not a substitute for legal compliance. But if a company is not satisfying the legal compliance, it is not eligible to be certified to ISMS as well. And then there are technical compliances, like you have to do vulnerability assessment of your applications and network, and also penetration testing of your network. And if someone wants to implement the system in their organization, these are some of the steps that have been given. First of all, the management has to decide that it wants to implement the system, then study the standard and establish the framework. You have to establish the security organization. The person who is responsible for implementing this is usually called CISO, or the Chief Information Security Officer, or maybe the management rep, or whatever you call him. And then establish a security forum who will look after this implementation and day-to-day activities. Then develop inventory of assets. List all the IT assets that you want to protect. That includes even hard copy files. For example, if you go to HR department, the personal files of all the people may also form as information asset. And if you go to the design department, all the design documents also need to be protected. And then a gap analysis can be done. Gap analysis is also like an audit, but it is done at the initial stage because you may not be a greenfield company. When you do a gap analysis right in the beginning, you will know where significant gaps are there so that they can be addressed first. Then ISMS is established, and it's a documented system. So documentation is developed, and you have to create awareness, conduct training programs, and implement the procedures that have been written down, and then monitor it and continually improve. So these are some of the documents that need to be developed for implementing an ISMS system. First thing is the security policy manual, which is the highest level or apex manual, which outlines the policies with respect to various aspects mentioned in the standard. Like, for example, the standard says you have to do internal audit. You will say in the policy manual that it is our policy to do internal audits once in 6 months and so on. For details, refer our internal audit procedure. Okay. Even the controls that are implemented in the organization can be briefly described in the policy manual, and detailed description can be given in the procedures, which is one level down. And still more detailed documents are operational documents, which are something like work instructions, like day-to-day operations. For example, the IT person, how to take backup, switch on the machine, look for this prompt, type this command. So those are step-by-step instructions. Those are more detailed. And then you have records. Records are evidence of implementing the system. For example, you have an incident report. Whenever security incidents take place, you record them. So that forms a record. So this is the documentation structure required for the standard. And the question is, how much of documentation, how detailed we should do the documentation? Well, it depends on the size and type of the organization, complexity, infrastructure, and all that. And it is inversely proportional to competence of personnel. If your people are more competent, you need lesser documentation. Now, the question is how to determine that. It depends on the experience. Suppose the system administrator is highly experienced, he has been working from 5 years, you need not really tell him how to take a backup and all that. So that's how it is. And just a couple of slides on the certification process. So there are 2 stages actually. If someone wants to implement an information security management system, you have to first implement it in the organization, which may take, depending on the size, 3 months to 6 months to 1 year to 1.5 years, depending on how much you dedicate to that, the number of people who are dedicated to that. And once you have implemented everything, you're ready for certification. And that is when this certification process starts. So application is made to a certifying body. Incidentally, I'm from STQC, we are also a certifying body. Then the documents are evaluated, and 2-stage audit is done. Stage 1 to see adequacy of documents, and stage 2 to see the implementation. The idea is whatever you have documented in the procedures has to be exactly implemented by the organization. And the audit sees whether you are implementing everything what you have written in the document or not. That's the basic thing. And then maintenance of certificate. The certificate once given is valid for 3 years, and every year there is a surveillance audit. And renewal will be done after 3 years. There are surveillance audits to ensure that certification is maintained. And this is a slide on the difference between ISMS certification and legal compliance. ISMS certification is not a mandatory thing. It's till now voluntary. But if you see IT Act, Information Technology Act 2008, almost it makes it mandatory. Even if a company feels that, for example, a small company, it says, I don't have any information to protect. Even if anybody sees my information, I don't lose anything. Why should I go for this? But please remember, your innocent site can be used by a hacker to launch an attack. And you will become liable for that. So that's why protection is required. But ISMS, although it's not legally binding as yet, but it's almost told in IT Act, it becomes something like a minimum eligibility criteria now. If you want to do business with the West, They all ask for information security. And especially with the cloud computing, people focus a lot on this. And benefits, you already know, it's an internationally recognized structured methodology and a single reference point for a range of controls. A defined process to evaluate and implement and manage information security and all that. Okay. So, but basically what I want you to understand is it's a management system, and it has technical controls also built in it. It doesn't mean that once you're ISMS certified, your site will never be hacked and things like that. It only says that you have a good management system that when you fall, you can quickly get up. I think that's the end of it. Yeah.